A single father sat alone in an upscale restaurant, craving 60 seconds of peace. Then an older
This is a
woman he'd
serious
never
matter.
met
We
slid
must
into his
proceed with
booth,
caution.
grabbed
I
his
urge you
wrist,
all to think
and
carefully.
whispered 7 words that
Did
hijacked
you
his
see what
entire
she
life.
just did? No way,
Pretend
really?
you're my daughter's
What are you two
fiancé.
talking about?
What would you do if a stranger asked you to lie for them in front of a room full of judgment? Would you walk away? Or would you see yourself in the desperation of someone being torn apart by the people who claim to love them? This isn't just a story about a fake engagement. It's about what happens when two people who've spent their whole lives being told they're not enough finally stop running from the truth. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and the kind of winter that seeps through old windows no matter how many towels you stuff in the cracks. Daniel Carter stood in the kitchen of a studio that wasn't supposed to house 2 people, but did anyway, because rent in Seattle doesn't care about your story. A purple backpack sat by the door with a paper snowflake taped to it. The snowflake had 7 points instead of 6, because Lily didn't believe in rules when it came to art. She hopped on one foot near the doorway, fighting with her left boot like it had personally offended her. "Dad, you're tying it wrong." Daniel knelt on linoleum that had seen better decades. His fingers were stiff from the cold that lived in his bones now, the kind that comes from working outside when the world is barely awake. The calluses on his palms caught on the laces as he pulled them tight, hands that knew how to lift 40-pound boxes but struggled with the delicate work of making a 7-year-old's morning easier. "It's called functional. You're welcome." Lily giggled, the sound cutting through the gray morning like something holy. Then she went still in that way kids do when they're about to say something that rewires your whole chest. "Are you going to be tired forever?" Daniel's hand stopped moving. He didn't answer with words because words would have cracked. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in the strawberry shampoo he bought in bulk because it was the one thing she asked for by name. The scent was too sweet, too artificial, but it meant home in a way nothing else did. "Not forever, sweetie. Just today." Lily accepted this the way children accept gravity, as an unchangeable fact of the universe. She kissed his cheek, grabbed her backpack, and marched toward the door like she owned the entire world. The snowflake fluttered as she moved, its uneven points catching the weak morning light filtering through curtains he'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. They were supposed to be cream-colored, but it faded to the kind of beige that gave up trying. Daniel followed her into the cold. The drive to Lincoln Elementary took 12 minutes in traffic that shouldn't exist at 7 in the morning, but always did. Lily sang to herself in the back seat, making up words to songs that didn't have lyrics, her voice rising and falling with a confidence he envied. She'd gotten that from her mother, the ability to fill silence with joy instead of letting it press down until you couldn't breathe. He pulled up to the drop-off lane. Lily unbuckled herself, kissed 2 fingers, and pressed them to the photo taped to the back of the passenger seat. A woman with dark hair and a smile that didn't know it was temporary smiled back from behind the plastic sleeve Daniel had bought to protect it from sticky fingers and spilled juice boxes. "Bye, Mama." Then she was gone, swallowed by the stream of kids flooding through double doors painted the color of safety. Daniel sat there longer than he should have, watching until the purple backpack disappeared into the building. A car honked behind him. He drove. The delivery van was older than his relationship with Lily's mother had been. It rattled like it was held together by duct tape and prayers, which wasn't far from the truth. Daniel had bought it used from a guy who swore it had good bones. Turned out, good bones still break if you run them hard enough. The engine coughed to life on the second try, spitting exhaust into the morning air while he waited for the heater to remember it had a job to do. He picked up his route sheet from the depot in Sodo. 43 stops, residential and commercial. boxes that weighed anywhere from 2 pounds to 50. People who answer the door in bathrobes, and people who didn't answer at all, just left notes that said, "Leave it by the planter," or "Don't ring the bell, baby's sleeping." Daniel didn't mind. The work was honest. It didn't ask him to pretend to be anything other than a guy who showed up on time and didn't break your stuff. He worked through lunch because lunch cost money, and stopping cost time. The protein bar he ate behind the wheel tasted like cardboard mixed with optimism, but it kept his stomach from eating itself. He checked his phone between stops. No new messages. No one to report to except the scheduling algorithm and the little girl who called him Dad. By 3 in the afternoon, his back ached in that specific way that meant he'd lifted wrong at least twice. The pain started in his lower spine and radiated up through his shoulders, settling into the muscles like an old friend who'd overstayed their welcome. By 4, the winter sun was already thinking about quitting, the light going thin and watery over the sound. By 5, the city was turning gold in that brief, violent way it does before it gives up and goes dark. Daniel finished his last delivery outside a condo in Capitol Hill. The building had a doorman and a lobby with marble floors that looked like they cost more than Daniel made in a year. The guy who answered the door didn't say thank you, just grabbed the box and closed the door like Daniel was part of the furniture. Not invisible exactly, but not quite human either. Just another cog in the machine that made his life convenient. He sat in the van for a long moment, engine idling, heat blowing weakly from vents that had given up trying years ago. The inside smelled like old coffee and the pine air freshener he'd hung from the rearview mirror in a futile attempt to mask the scent of diesel and defeat. He pulled out his phone and looked at his bank account, not because he needed to, but because he did this every Friday like penance. Rent was paid, utilities were covered, groceries were budgeted down to the last can of store-brand soup. Lily's field trip fund had $17 in it. Not enough for the zoo trip next month, but he'd figure something out. He always did. There was a little left over, not much, but enough. Daniel made a decision. He drove downtown instead of home, past the neighborhoods where people like him delivered packages to people who lived in a different world. The streets got narrower, the buildings got taller, and the parking got expensive. He found a garage that charged more per hour than he made in 2 and pulled in anyway, taking a ticket from a machine that didn't care about his budget. The elevator smelled like someone else's cologne and the kind of money that makes everything else smell better. 3 blocks on foot. The cold had hands that shoved deep into his jacket pockets, reminding him that the lining had torn last winter and he'd never gotten around to fixing it. His breath came out in clouds that dissipated before they meant anything. He walked past storefronts with window displays that looked like art installations, past restaurants with names he couldn't pronounce, past people in coats that probably cost more than his van. He stopped outside a place called Bellevue House in Pioneer Square. The windows glowed warm. Inside, people sat at tables with white lemons and candles that didn't flicker because the air was controlled to within 2 degrees of perfect. A host in a vest stood by the door, smiling at a couple in clothes that whispered wealth instead of shouting it. Daniel almost turned around. He'd been turning around for 2 years now, turning around from places that felt too nice, turning around from conversations that went too deep, turning around from anything that reminded him he used to be someone other than Lily's dad and a guy with a route sheet. But standing there on the cold sidewalk, watching other people live lives that looked warm and full, something in him refused to move backward one more time. He walked in. The host's eyes flicked to his boots, steel-toed, scuffed, streaked with the kind of dirt that comes from real work. Then they flicked to his face. Daniel didn't flinch. He was too tired to be embarrassed, too worn down by the day to care what this kid in a vest thought of him. "Table for one, please." The host hesitated just long enough for Daniel to notice, then smiled in that professional way that means we're trained not to judge, but we're still human. "Right this way." Daniel followed him through the restaurant, past tables full of people who looked like they belonged, couples leaning close over wine glasses, groups of friends laughing at stories that ended well, a family celebrating something that warranted champagne in an ice bucket. He was led to a corner booth by the window, the kind of spot they give to people they're not sure about. Out of the way, but not quite hidden, a compromise between hospitality and hope that he wouldn't linger. He sat. The leather was soft and cold. The table had a single candle and a small vase with something green that wasn't trying to be a flower, just existing as proof that someone had thought about aesthetics. A server appeared, young and efficient, kind in a way that didn't cost extra. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Daniel glanced at the menu. Wine by the glass started at $14, beer at $9. He could feel the weight of the prices pressing against his wallet, reminding him of the $17 in Lily's field trip fund and the protein bar he'd eaten for lunch. "Just tea, please. Earl Grey, if you have it." The server nodded and disappeared. Daniel sat back and let himself breathe. This was his one luxury. Not every week, not even every month. But sometimes, when the world felt like it was sitting on his chest, and Lily was safe at school, and the van didn't need an oil change he couldn't afford yet, Daniel came to a place like this and ordered tea and pretended he was a person who had time to sit down. The server returned with a small teapot and a cup. The steam rose lazy and warm, carrying the scent of bergamot and something floral he couldn't name. It smelled expensive. It smelled like the kind of thing people who didn't count pennies took for granted. "Anything else for you?" Daniel shook his head, already halfway into the exhale he'd been holding since morning. "Just this, thanks." The server walked away. Daniel poured the tea slowly, listening to the sound of liquid meeting porcelain, the faint clink of the lid settling back. He lifted the cup and let the heat touch his face, steam opening his sinuses and reminding his body that warmth existed somewhere in the universe. His shoulders dropped half an inch. Across the room, laughter spiked, sharp and performative, the kind people make when they're not actually amused but need everyone to know they're having a good time. Daniel glanced over. A long table near the center of the restaurant was packed with people in holiday outfits. Shiny shoes, tight smiles, jewelry that caught the light like little warnings. They looked like a family. They sounded like a negotiation. Daniel turned back to his tea. He wasn't here to watch other people's lives. He was here to remember what quiet felt like. But the voices got louder. Not aggressive, worse, concerned. "Kara, honey, you're still alone?" The voice belonged to a woman in her 40s with perfect hair and a smile that looked like it had been focus grouped. She leaned toward someone at the far end of the table, the kind of lean that means, "I'm saying this for your own good." Daniel couldn't see who she was talking to. Not yet. A man's voice joined in, softer but no less pointed. "She's married to her calendar." Laughter rippled around the table, polite, practiced, cruel in the way families are when they've been doing this long enough to think it's love. Daniel's jaw tightened. He took a sip of tea and tried to focus on the window, on the street outside, on the people walking past who had no idea they were visible. But he could still hear them. "When are you going to settle down, sweetheart? You're not getting any younger. Do you even have time to date? Maybe you're just too picky. You can't expect perfection, you know." Daniel set his cup down harder than he meant to. The clink echoed just loud enough for the couple at the next table to glance over. He forced himself to look. At the end of the long table sat a woman in a simple black dress. No jewelry except a watch that caught the light when she moved her wrist. Her posture was perfect, in that way that means I've been holding myself together for hours. Her smile was small and controlled, the kind of smile people wear when they've run out of ways to defend themselves, but haven't been given permission to leave. She nodded at something someone said. Her eyes stayed on her plate like the plate was the only safe place to look. Daniel recognized that look. He'd worn it himself at his in-laws' house after the funeral, when everyone kept saying, "She's in a better place," and "You're so strong," and "What are you going to do now?" As if grief was a project he needed to manage better. He'd sat there nodding, smiling, agreeing, because fighting back would have made it worse, and leaving would have felt like abandoning the last place his wife had been loved. So he stayed and smiled, and let them measure his life like it was a group project he was failing. The woman at the table did the same thing now. She picked up her water glass, took a sip, set it down. She straightened her napkin. She checked her watch like she had somewhere to be, but Daniel could see the truth. She didn't. She just needed something to do with her hands while her family dissected her life like doctors around an operating table, discussing symptoms without considering the patient might still be conscious. An older woman sat beside her. Daniel noticed her because she wasn't talking. She was watching. Her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white against the dark fabric of her dress. Her mouth was pressed into a tight line like she was physically holding words back, swallowing them down where they burned. She looked like she wanted to flip the table. Instead, she stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loud enough to pause the conversation. "Excuse me. Restroom." Her voice was clipped, professional, the kind of tone people use when they're 3 seconds away from detonating, but need everyone to think they're fine. She walked toward the back of the restaurant, heels clicking on hardwood with a rhythm that sounded like counting down. Then she stopped, right beside Daniel's table. She turned and looked at him. Really looked. Her eyes swept over his jacket, still damp from walking through the cold. His hands, resting on either side of the teacup, calloused and rough. His face, which probably showed every one of the 2 years he'd spent trying to hold his life together with sheer stubbornness. She took in the tea, the solitude, the fact that he was sitting alone in a place like this on a Friday evening when most people were surrounded by noise. Daniel met her gaze. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with words. Recognition. She saw someone alone. He saw someone desperate. And in that moment, Margaret Brennan made a decision that would unravel and rebuild 2 lives. She smoothed her coat, squared her shoulders, and walked to his table like she'd been invited. Daniel's heart kicked once, hard, before she even sat down, because he knew. Somehow he knew this woman was about to ask him for something, and whatever it was going to cost more than tea. Her hand closed around his wrist, not rough, but not gentle either. Urgent. Her voice dropped to a whisper that barely made it across the table. "Please pretend you're my daughter's fiancé. Just for today." Daniel's mouth opened. No sound came out. His brain was trying to process the request, the sheer audacity of it, the desperation behind it, the fact that a complete stranger was sitting at his table asking him to lie to her family. Behind her, at the long table, the woman in black glanced up. Her eyes found her mother's empty chair. Then they found Daniel. Confusion flickered across her face, sharp and immediate. Then something deeper. Concern. Margaret's grip tightened on his wrist. They do this every time. They corner her, tear her apart with manners. I can't watch it again. Daniel should have said no, should have pulled his hand back, apologized, wished her well, returned to his tea and his silence and his small, safe corner of the world where strangers didn't ask impossible things. But he looked past Margaret to the woman at the table, watched her smile at something someone said, watched the smile not reach her eyes, stop somewhere around her cheekbones where it lost momentum and died. And he thought about Lily, thought about the world she was growing into, thought about the day, inevitable as winter, when someone would sit her down and tell her she wasn't living her life correctly, wasn't choosing the right things, wasn't enough in some fundamental way that had nothing to do with who she actually was and everything to do with who they needed her to be. He thought about the man he wanted to be when that day came, the man who didn't just watch it happen, the man who stood up. Daniel pulled his wrist free, slowly enough that Margaret's face began to fall. Then he pushed his tea aside and met her eyes. Just for the meal. Hope cracked across Margaret's face like light through a broken wall. Just for the meal. Daniel stood. His chair scraped loud in the quiet restaurant. Heads turned. He buttoned his jacket, the one with the torn lining he'd never fixed, and tried to look like a man who knew what he was doing, instead of a man who'd just agreed to the most reckless thing he'd done since his wife died. Margaret rose beside him, suddenly taller, suddenly ready, transformed from desperate mother to general preparing for battle. They crossed the room together. The family table slowed its noise the way predators do when something unfamiliar enters the clearing. Conversations tapered. Forks paused midair. Eyes tracked their approach with the kind of attention people give to things that don't quite fit the pattern they expected. Margaret lifted her voice, bright and practiced and sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. Everyone, I want you to meet someone. Every face turned. The woman in black looked up. Her eyes went wide. She glanced at her mother, then at Daniel, then back, trying to solve an equation she didn't have all the numbers for. Her mouth opened slightly, words forming behind her lips that would either accept this madness or expose it. Margaret smiled like she was placing a crown. This is Daniel, my daughter's fiancé. The silence that followed had weight. The kind you can feel in your chest, pressing against your ribs, making it hard to draw a full breath. Daniel extended his hand across the table, the gesture automatic, trained into him by years of customer service and a childhood that emphasized manners even when you couldn't afford much else. The woman stared at his hand, then at him. Her eyes were brown, he noticed, dark enough to hide things. Her fingers were long, elegant, the nails shaped but not painted. She was deciding something in that moment, weighing variables he couldn't see, calculating risks he couldn't guess. Then her eyes flicked to her mother's face one more time. She saw the desperation there, saw the plan, saw the escape route her mother had built out of a stranger's kindness. And she made a choice. She reached out and took Daniel's hand. Her fingers were warm. Her grip was steady until it wasn't, until it tightened just enough to say, I don't know what this is, but thank you. Her voice came out softer than Daniel expected, with an edge of something that might have been relief, or might have been terror, or might have been both. Hi. He forced himself to smile, calm, easy, like he'd done this 1,000 times instead of never in his life. Hi. Margaret gestured to an empty chair beside her daughter with the kind of authority that made refusal impossible. "Daniel, sit. Please." He sat. The woman beside him smelled like something clean and expensive. Lavender, maybe, or bergamot. Something that didn't come from a drugstore shelf or a bulk order website. Something chosen deliberately instead of accepted out of necessity. She leaned close, just barely, her voice a whisper that only he could hear. "What are you doing?" Daniel kept his eyes forward, his voice low. "I have no idea." Her breath hitched. Not quite a laugh, not quite panic. Somewhere in between, in that space where absurdity meets desperation and you're not sure whether to scream or surrender. Around the table, the family recalibrated. Aunt Patricia's smile turned sharper, more focused, like a predator adjusting its aim. Cousin Jason straightened in his chair, suddenly alert, sensing new sport. The others exchanged glances that carried entire conversations. Surprise, curiosity, judgment, assessment, all compressed into fractions of seconds. And just like that, Daniel Carter, delivery driver, single father, man who just wanted 60 seconds of peace, was in it. The meal hadn't even started yet, and he was already wondering if he just made the best or worst decision of his life. The first question came before Daniel had even fully settled into his chair. Patricia leaned forward, her smile fixed in place like a mask that had been worn so many times it had molded to her face. Her hands were folded on the table, rings catching candlelight, everything about her posture screaming, "I'm being polite, but I'm also in charge here." "So, Daniel, this is quite the surprise." Daniel reached for the water glass in front of him, buying himself 2 seconds. The glass was cold and heavy and real, which helped because nothing else about this moment felt like it was actually happening. He took a sip, set it down, met her eyes with the same calm he used when customers complained about late deliveries that weren't his fault. "Good surprise, I hope." Patricia's smile didn't waver, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "Well, Kara's been so private about her personal life. We had no idea she was even seeing anyone." Beside him, the woman he was apparently engaged to went very still. Daniel could feel the tension radiating off her like heat, could sense the way she was bracing for impact, waiting to see if this stranger would throw her under the bus or actually pull off the impossible. Margaret reached across the table and patted her daughter's hand, her voice warm and matter-of-fact. "Kara wanted to be sure before she made it public. You know how she is. Thoughtful." The word landed like a shield. It gave Kara space to breathe, gave Daniel a framework to work within. He made a mental note that Margaret Brennan was terrifyingly good at this. A man across the table with graying hair and a tie that looked like it cost more than Daniel's rent leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel the way people study art they're not sure is worth the asking price. "And what do you do, Daniel?" The table went quiet. This was the real question, the one that mattered, the one that would determine whether Daniel was worthy of sitting here or whether he was just some charity case Kara had dragged in out of pity. Daniel didn't blink. "Logistics, delivery, and routing. I work for a distribution company that handles last-mile fulfillment for e-commerce." It was the truth. It was also the most polished version of "I drive a van and drop off boxes" that he could manage without sounding like he was apologizing for his existence. He'd learned years ago that how you framed something mattered more than what it actually was. Confidence sold stories that facts alone couldn't. A few people around the table nodded, the kind of nods people give when they're processing information and deciding whether it's acceptable. Cousin Jason, a guy in his early 30s with hair gel and a smirk that suggested he'd never been told no in his life, jumped in. "So you're like a UPS driver?" The question was designed to sound innocent. It wasn't. Daniel held his gaze, refusing to let the diminishment land. "Similar concept, different model. We focus on high-volume residential delivery with dynamic routing algorithms. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." He didn't say, "And I'm proud of it." He didn't have to. The way he said it made those things clear. Made it clear that he wasn't going to apologize for making an honest living, wasn't going to shrink himself to make them more comfortable. Kara's fingers brushed his under the table. Quick, light. A signal that could have meant anything, but felt like thank you. Patricia jumped back in, her tone sticky sweet. "And you met Kara where exactly?" Daniel had about half a second to come up with something believable. He glanced at Kara, letting his eyes linger just long enough to sell the idea that looking at her was something he did often, something comfortable, something natural. "Friends gathering. Late summer." Kara's eyes widened a fraction. Then she caught on, her brain clicking into gear, building on the foundation he'd laid. "August. A barbecue in Ballard. Mutual friend from college." Daniel picked up the thread without missing a beat. "I wasn't going to go. I'm not great at parties, but my friend insisted after he helped me move in July." He glanced at Kara again, this time with a small smile that he half invented and half felt, remembering what it was like to meet someone new and feel that spark of possibility. "She was the only person there who didn't fake laugh at my jokes." A ripple of genuine laughter went around the table. It was small, but it was real, people leaning into the story instead of picking it apart. Kara surprised him by laughing too. Quiet, but authentic. She shook her head like she was remembering something that actually happened instead of a fiction they were inventing in real time. "They were terrible. That's what made them kind of charming." Something in the air shifted. The interrogation didn't stop, but it changed shape. It became less about poking holes and more about gathering details, the way people do when they're starting to believe the story they're being told. "How long have you been together? Where do you live? Have you met Lily?" That last question came from Margaret, and Daniel realized with a jolt that she knew his daughter's name. She must have overheard him on the phone earlier, or maybe she'd just guessed. But either way, it grounded the lie in something true, made it feel real in a way that nothing else could. "Karen knows Lily," Daniel said, and this time he didn't have to fake the warmth in his voice. Talking about his daughter was the easiest thing in the world. "She's 7. She's the reason I do everything." Kara's face softened. She looked at him like she was seeing something she hadn't expected, something that complicated the simple transaction they'd entered into. "She's wonderful," Kara added quietly, and even though she'd never met Lily, even though this was all improvisation and desperation, something in her voice made it sound true. "Smart, creative. She has very strong opinions about dragons." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. This woman he'd known for less than 10 minutes was talking about his daughter like she mattered, like she was real and important and worth mentioning, like Lily wasn't just a detail in a story, but a person who deserved to be seen. Across the table, an older man who'd been silent until now finally spoke. His voice was measured, careful, the kind of tone that signals incoming judgment dressed up as concern. "This all seems very sudden." Daniel recognized the tone. It was the same one his father-in-law had used after the funeral, when he'd suggested that maybe Daniel should consider letting Lily live with them for a while. "Just until you get back on your feet." It was concern disguised as reason, disguised as judgment, disguised as love, all wrapped up so tightly you couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. Daniel met his eyes without flinching. It might seem that way from the outside, but when something's right, you know. Kara and I didn't want to rush the public part. We wanted it to be ours first, before it became everyone else's. That landed. Even Patricia seemed to pause, reassessing. The words carried weight because they sounded like something someone would actually say, like a truth instead of a convenient lie. Margaret reached for her wine glass, and Daniel saw the smallest smile touch her lips before she hid it behind a sip. The meal continued. Servers brought plates, courses Daniel hadn't ordered because he wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't part of the plan until Margaret had hijacked him into it. Conversation fragmented into smaller groups. Daniel found himself answering questions from Kara's father about Seattle traffic patterns and delivery route optimization, which was surreal, but also strangely grounding. The man was quieter than the rest of the family, less performative. He asked questions like he actually wanted to know the answers, like Daniel's work was interesting instead of something to be judged. Beside him, Kara navigated her own set of conversations with practiced ease. She deflected questions about wedding timelines and dodged inquiries about her work with the kind of skill that came from years of practice, from a lifetime of learning how to protect herself in rooms full of people who loved her but didn't understand her. But every so often, her hand would find Daniel's under the table. A quick touch, a reassurance, a lifeline thrown across the space between two people who were strangers pretending to be something more. Except it was starting to feel like maybe the pretending was making something real. Daniel started to notice things about her, the way she held her fork, precise, controlled, like everything else about her was precise and controlled, because letting go meant falling apart. The way she laughed at her cousin's jokes, even when they weren't funny, because it was easier than explaining why they weren't. The way her shoulders were up near her ears, like she was bracing for impact that never quite came, but never quite stopped threatening either. The way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't paying attention, like she was trying to figure out if he was real, or if this whole thing was going to collapse any second and leave her more exposed than she'd been before. At one point, Patricia asked about the proposal. Oh God, how did he ask? The table leaned in. Even the people who'd been skeptical looked curious now, pulled into the narrative despite themselves. Daniel's mind went blank. Kara's hand tightened on his, urgent, a silent plea for help that he had no idea how to answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft, building an escape route for both of them. It was quiet. No big production, just us. Daniel looked at her and saw what she was doing, giving him space to fill in the blanks, trusting him to follow her lead. He stepped into it. I'm not a grand gesture kind of guy, Patricia pressed because of course she did. Which was... Daniel didn't plan what came next. It just came out, honest and unpolished and more real than anything he'd said all night. That I didn't want to do life without her. The table went quiet. Kara's eyes locked on his. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with the performance they were putting on, and everything to do with the accidental truth that had just slipped out. Because he'd meant it. Maybe not about her specifically, they'd known each other for 30 minutes, but about the idea of her, about the possibility of not being alone, about wanting someone to come home to who saw him as more than just tired. Margaret cleared her throat gently, pulling focus. Daniel's very grounded. It's refreshing. The conversation moved on. Dessert came. Coffee was offered. The meal stretched into that strange space where people have run out of things to say but aren't ready to leave yet, held together by inertia, and the social contract that says you can't just bolt from a family dinner even when you desperately want to. Finally, Patricia gathered her purse.
Well, this has been lovely. Kara, we should do this more often. And Daniel, it was wonderful to meet you. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of you.
The words were friendly. The subtext was, I'm still watching. People began to stand. Coats were retrieved. Goodbyes were exchanged with varying degrees of warmth. Daniel stood when Kara did, his body operating on autopilot, years of customer service training kicking in to smooth over the awkwardness of not knowing exactly what to do next. He helped her with her coat without thinking about it, just did it because his hands were there, and it seemed like the right thing to do. Her eyes met his as she turned, something soft and surprised in her expression. Thank you, she mouthed, the words silent but clear. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Margaret hugged him quickly, fiercely, her voice a whisper against his shoulder. You're a good man. Then she was gone, swept up in the tide of family members heading for the exit. Kara lingered. The restaurant was quieter now, winding down. The remaining diners were couples finishing wine, people in no hurry to return to the cold. Kara looked at Daniel like she was about to say something, then changed her mind, then changed it back. Can we talk, just for a minute? Daniel should have said no, should have smiled, wished her well, walked out into the night and never looked back. Let this be a strange story he told himself when he couldn't sleep, a moment of recklessness that ended without consequences. Instead, he said yes. They stepped out onto the patio. The air hit like a slap, winter reminding them it was still there, still waiting. The patio was empty except for 2 heaters that glowed orange but didn't do much. The city stretched out below them, lights blinking like a machine that never shut down, like proof that somewhere out there, people were living lives that made sense. Kara crossed her arms, not looking at him. I don't know where to start. Daniel leaned against the railing, giving her space. You could start with your name. I know it's Kara, but I feel like I should at least know your last name if I'm going to be your fake fiancé. She laughed, a real one this time, short and surprised and a little broken. Brennan. Caroline Brennan. Everyone calls me Kara except my grandfather, who insists on Caroline because he says nicknames are for people who don't take themselves seriously. Daniel smiled. And do you take yourself seriously? Kara turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. Too seriously, probably. That's part of the problem. Daniel waited. He'd learned a long time ago that silence was more powerful than questions. People filled silence with truth if you gave them enough space. Kara took a breath, the kind that means you're about to say something that costs you. They do this every time. Not just holidays, birthdays, Easter, random Sunday brunches. They corner me and they pick apart my life like it's a group project I'm failing. Her voice cracked on the last word, the careful control slipping just enough to show the wound underneath. Daniel's hands tightened on the railing. What's normal? Kara shrugged, a gesture that tried to be casual and failed spectacularly. Their version, I guess. Husband by 30, kids by 35, a life that looks good in Christmas cards. She turned to face the city, her voice dropping. I'm 38. I run a company. I have a career I worked my entire adult life to build. But to them, that's just me being selfish. Me being difficult. Me refusing to grow up and do what women are supposed to do. Daniel heard the anger under the exhaustion. Heard the years of fighting battles she couldn't win because the people judging her were the ones who were supposed to love her unconditionally, heard the weight of expectations that had nothing to do with who she actually was and everything to do with who they needed her to be so they could feel comfortable. Your mom seems to get it. Kara's expression softened. Mom's the only one who doesn't treat my life like a problem to solve. But she can't fight them. Not directly. They'd turn on her too. Daniel understood that. Understood the politics of families, the careful alliances, the price of speaking up when everyone else wanted silence. Understood that sometimes love looked like letting someone recruit a stranger in a restaurant because that was the only move left on the board. So she recruited me. Kara looked at him, really looked at him, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out what kind of person agrees to lie for a stranger. Why did you say yes? Daniel thought about Lily, thought about the world she was walking into, thought about the day, coming faster than he was ready for, when someone would sit her down and tell her she wasn't good enough because she'd made choices they didn't approve of. I have a daughter, Lily. She's 7. Kara's expression shifted, surprise, then something softer. I know. You mentioned her at the table. Daniel nodded. Someday someone's going to look at her and decide she's not doing life right. They're going to tell her she's too much, or not enough, or wrong somehow. He met Kara's eyes. I don't want to be the kind of person who sees that happening and does nothing. The words hung in the cold air between them. Kara's face did something complicated. Her eyes went bright, filling with something that might have been tears if she let them come. She looked away quickly, blinking. That's the best reason anyone's ever given me for anything. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settling over them like snow that wouldn't melt. Kara hugged herself tighter against the cold, breath coming out in small clouds that disappeared before they meant anything. You know what the worst part is? They think they're helping. They think if they just push hard enough, I'll wake up and realize I've been living my life wrong, and I'll fix it. Get married, have babies, be grateful. Her voice turned sharp, edged with something that had been building for years. They don't see that I like my life, that I chose this, that I'm not waiting to be rescued. Daniel believed her, could see it in the way she stood, the way she spoke, the way she'd handled that table full of judgment with grace she shouldn't have had to perform. But he also saw the cost, saw it in the tension she carried like armor, in the careful control that never quite relaxed, in the practiced smile that stopped before it reached anything vital. For what it's worth, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. Kara turned to face him fully. You don't even know me. Daniel shrugged. I know you didn't ask for what happened in there. I know your mom was desperate enough to grab a stranger. I know you handled it with more grace than most people could manage. He paused. And I know what it looks like when someone's surviving instead of living. I've been there. Kara's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Your daughter's mother. Daniel nodded once, the motion small and final. 2 years ago. Car accident. Sudden. Kara's hand came up to her mouth. I'm so sorry. Daniel looked out at the city, at the lights that kept going no matter what happened to the people beneath them. People told me how to grieve, when to move on, what was healthy and what wasn't. They had opinions about how I was raising Lily, whether I should date, whether I was doing enough or too much. He turned back to Kara. Nobody asked what I needed. They just told me what they thought I should do. Kara's eyes were wet now, the carefully maintained composure finally cracking. That's exactly what it feels like. They stood there in the cold, two strangers who'd accidentally told each other true things, the kind of things you usually only say to people who've earned the right to hear them. Except sometimes desperation creates shortcuts through all the normal barriers people build. Finally, Kara pulled out her phone. Her fingers were shaking from cold or emotion or both. Would it be weird if I got your number? Daniel raised an eyebrow. After I just pretended to be your fiancé in front of your entire family? Kara laughed, the sound almost surprised out of her. Fair point. She started typing. So that's a yes? Daniel pulled out his own phone. The screen was cracked in the corner from where he'd dropped it loading boxes last month, a spiderweb of broken glass he couldn't afford to fix. Just in case they ask again, right? Kara's fingers flew over her screen, but her eyes said something else entirely. Right. Purely practical. They exchanged numbers. Kara typed his name in and stared at it like she was testing how it sounded in her head, like she was deciding whether this was a person she wanted in her life or a story she'd tell someday about the weird thing that happened at Thanksgiving. Daniel Carter. Daniel watched her save the contact. Caroline Brennan. He said it back, formal and complete, the version of her the world saw instead of the person standing in front of him with mascara threatening to run and defenses finally lowered. Kara shivered hard enough that he noticed. I should go. My mom's probably waiting. Daniel nodded. Yeah, and I need to pick up Lily from my neighbors. She's probably built an entire city out of couch cushions by now. Kara smiled, and this time it reached something deeper. She sounds amazing. She is. They stood there for another beat, neither quite ready to move. Then Kara did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and hugged him. Quick, tight, the kind of hug that says, thank you, and I needed this, and I don't know how to say what this meant, all compressed into 3 seconds of contact. Daniel's arms came up automatically. He hugged her back, and for a second, everything else fell away. The lie, the performance, the fact that they were strangers. For a second, it was just two people who'd survived something hard and found each other by accident. Kara pulled back, her cheeks pink from cold or embarrassment or both. Thank you. Really. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice to stay steady. She turned and walked back inside. Through the glass, Daniel watched her find Margaret, watched her mother pull her into a hug, watched them talk with heads close together. Even from here, he could see the relief on both their faces, could see the weight lifting just enough to let them breathe. Then they were gone. Daniel stood alone on the patio for another minute. The city kept moving below him. The cold kept pressing. His phone felt heavy in his pocket, weighted with possibility and danger in equal measure. He pulled it out and looked at the new contact. Caroline Brennan. No photo. Just a number. Just a name. Just a door he could walk through or close. He pocketed the phone and headed back through the restaurant. The host nodded at him as he passed. The server from earlier was clearing a table and offered a smile. Daniel stepped out into the Seattle night where the cold had teeth and his jacket wasn't warm enough, but he barely noticed. His mind was still on the patio, still in the restaurant, still sitting at a table full of strangers, pretending to be someone he wasn't. Except it hadn't felt like pretending. Not entirely. The van started on the third try, engine coughing before it caught. Daniel sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, the vibration traveling up through his palms. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out. A text from an unknown number, except it wasn't unknown anymore. Thank you again. I know that was probably the strangest hour of your life. Daniel stared at the message. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. He could leave it, could let this be a weird story and nothing more, could go back to his life of delivery routes and protein bars and trying to be enough for a 7-year-old who deserved better than a father who is just barely holding it together. Instead, he typed, "Strange doesn't always mean bad. Your family is intense, though. Do they always come with that much firepower?" The response came fast. That was them being polite. "You should see Thanksgiving." Daniel smiled despite himself. "Pass. I value my sanity." "Smart man." A pause, then another message. "Seriously, though, you didn't have to do that, but I'm really glad you did." Daniel typed slowly, choosing words that felt true. "Your mom looked like she was 3 seconds from flipping the table. I couldn't let that happen. The tablecloth was too nice." Kara sent a laughing emoji, then another message. "Get home safe. Hug Lily for me." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Something small but significant. "Will do. You get home safe too." He put the phone down, put the van in gear, drove through streets that were familiar in the way things become familiar when you see them every day but never really look. His mind kept circling back to Kara on that patio, to the way she'd looked when she talked about her family, to the hug that had lasted 3 seconds but somehow felt longer. The apartment was warm when he got back. Mrs. Chen was on the couch with Lily, who was indeed building something elaborate out of cushions. The structure defied physics and common sense in equal measure, held together by imagination and the kind of confidence only 7-year-olds possess. Lily saw him and launched herself across the room. "Daddy!" Daniel caught her, lifted her, held her like she was the only real thing in the entire world, which, in most of the ways that mattered, she was. Mrs. Chen gathered her things. She was 65 and had been helping Daniel since the funeral, never asking for more than the $20 he could afford, and always leaving his apartment cleaner than she'd found it. She was perfect. We had mac and cheese, and she did her reading. Daniel thanked her, paid her from the bills he kept in his wallet for exactly this purpose, walked her to the door. Then it was just him and Lily. She looked at him with those eyes that saw everything. Eyes she'd inherited from her mother, along with the dark hair and the ability to know when he was lying about being fine. "You look different." Daniel sat her down gently on the couch. "Different how?" Lily tilted her head, studying him with the intensity of someone conducting an important scientific experiment. "Like you smiled today? Like a real smile, not a tired one." Daniel's throat tightened. His daughter, 7 years old and already reading him better than most adults ever had. "Maybe I did." Lily grinned, satisfied with this answer. "Good. I like when you're happy." She ran back to her cushion fort, already narrating the next part of whatever story she was building. Daniel stood in the kitchen and pulled out his phone again. Kara's number was there. Real. Possible. He should delete it. Should let tonight be what it was and nothing more. A strange kindness between strangers. A moment of connection that didn't need to become anything else. Instead, he saved the contact properly, added her last name, made it official. His phone buzzed again. "I just realized I never asked what you were doing at that restaurant in the first place. Do you go there often?" Daniel typed. "First time. I just wanted to sit somewhere quiet and drink tea without anyone needing anything from me for 10 minutes. And instead, you got recruited into the world's strangest improv show. Worth it, though. A longer pause this time. Daniel watched the 3 dots appear and disappear, like Kara was typing and deleting and typing again. Yeah. He looked at Lily, at the apartment, at his life that was small and hard and beautiful and his. Then he thought about Kara on that patio, about the way she'd looked when she stopped performing, about the truth in her voice when she talked about being tired of being measured. Yeah, he typed back. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a pattern Daniel didn't recognize he was building until he was already inside it. The text started Tuesday morning while he was loading the van, Kara sending a photo of airport coffee with the caption, "Why do I keep doing this to myself?" Daniel was sitting in the driver's seat eating a protein bar that tasted like cardboard and good intentions when it came through. He sent back a photo of the wrapper. Same question. At least yours has nutritional value. This is just hot regret. He laughed out loud in the empty van, the sound surprising him. Not the polite exhale he gave to customers' jokes, but something actual and unguarded. By Wednesday, they were sharing the small frustrations that made up real life. Kara sent a paragraph about a meeting that had devolved into 40 minutes of explaining something that should have taken 5, about wanting to print out the email she'd sent 3 weeks ago and just tape it to people's foreheads. Daniel responded between stops, typing on his phone while sitting in the van outside a 5th-floor walk-up where the elevator was broken and the package weighed 43 pounds. Customer note says, just leave it inside the door, like I have a key to their apartment, like I'm supposed to magic my way through locked doors. Do you not have magic? I thought all delivery drivers had magic. They took it away after I used it to make traffic lights turn green. Abuse of power. Understandable. Thursday, he sent her a photo of a delivery instruction that said, leave package in the blue bin by the rhododendron. I don't know what a rhododendron is, and I'm too afraid to ask. Rhododendron. It's a flowering shrub, usually pink or purple. How do you just know that? My mom is obsessed with gardening. I absorbed it against my will. Fair. Lily has made me an unwilling expert on dragon taxonomy. There's dragon taxonomy? According to Lily, there are 17 distinct subspecies, and they all have opinions about knights. The conversation spiraled from there, Kara asking questions about Lily's elaborate fantasy world, Daniel finding himself typing out long responses about his daughter's mythology, where dragons ran the postal service and knights were just customers with attitude problems. She sounds like someone I'd like to meet properly, without the fake engagement pressure. Daniel stared at that message for a full minute before responding. She'd like that. Fair warning, though, she asks a lot of questions. Good. I like curious kids. The quiet, polite ones scare me. Friday brought deeper sharing. Kara mentioned a standing Sunday call with her mom where they didn't talk about work or family drama, just gardening and whatever book Margaret was reading. She'd wanted to be an architect when she was young, but ended up in tech because that's where the opportunities were when she graduated. Sometimes she still walked past buildings and wondered what it would have been like to design spaces instead of software. Daniel told her about the 3 jobs he'd worked the year after Sarah died: morning delivery route, afternoon warehouse shift, evening grocery stocking. He'd barely slept and definitely hadn't processed anything until Mrs. Chen had sat him down and told him he was going to collapse if he didn't slow down. She was right. I was running on empty and calling it strength. That's what everyone does. We just give it different names. By Friday night, texting felt normal, natural, like something they'd been doing for years instead of days. Kara confirmed their Saturday plans with a casualness that belied the significance. Still on for tomorrow? 10 a.m.? Daniel looked at Lily, who was sprawled on the couch drawing dragons with anatomically impossible wings. We'll be there. Can't wait to meet the dragon expert properly. Saturday morning came bright and cold, the kind of Seattle winter day that tricks you into thinking it might be nice before it reminds you that nice is not the same as warm. The sky was blue in that sharp, crystalline way that means the temperature is barely above freezing. Lily woke before her alarm, which never happened on school days, but apparently happened when something exciting was on the schedule. She insisted on wearing her purple dress with the dragon patch she'd sewn on herself, the stitching crooked and enthusiastic. Is Kara nice? Daniel was making breakfast, trying to decide if he was more nervous or excited. Yeah, she's nice. Does she know about Mama? His hands stilled on the pan. The question wasn't accusatory, just practical. Lily processed the world through information, through knowing the parameters of situations before she entered them. Yeah, I told her. Lily was quiet for a moment, pouring syrup on her pancakes with the concentration of a surgeon. Okay, just checking. They drove to Green Lake and parked near the community center. The lake stretched out gray and calm, ringed by joggers and neon colors and dog walkers with animals that ranged from tiny, nervous creatures to beasts that looked like they could pull sleds. People were out despite the cold because Seattle people didn't let weather dictate their lives. They just layered up and carried on. Kara was already there. She stood near the coffee cart wearing jeans that looked soft and worn, a navy pea coat that wasn't trying to impress anyone, and boots that looked comfortable instead of expensive. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in a way Daniel hadn't seen before. No makeup that he could see, or at least nothing obvious. She looked younger than she had at the restaurant, less guarded, more like someone you'd actually know instead of someone performing the role of a person. She saw them and waved. Not a professional wave, a real one, slightly awkward and fully committed. Lily grabbed Daniel's hand, suddenly shy. Is that her? Daniel's throat felt tight for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. Yeah, that's Kara. Lily studied her with the intensity of a child deciding whether someone was worth trusting. Her criteria were mysterious and absolute, formed through 7 years of navigating a world that had already proven itself capable of taking people away without warning. She's pretty. Daniel squeezed her hand, warmth flooding through him that had nothing to do with the weak winter sun. Be cool, kiddo. Lily giggled, the sound cutting through his nervousness like light through clouds. You be cool. They walked over. Kara knelt down before Daniel could introduce them, getting eye level with Lily in that way that some adults do instinctively and others never learn. It was a gesture that said, I see you as a person, not a miniature version of something that will become important later. Hi, you must be Lily. Your dad told me you're the boss around here. Lily considered this seriously, weighing whether it was true or flattery designed to manipulate her. He listens. Sometimes. Kara's face broke into a genuine smile, the kind that crinkled her eyes and showed teeth and looked nothing like the controlled expression she'd worn at the family dinner. Sometimes is a strong start. I'm working on getting my team to listen half the time. Lily decided in that moment that Kara was acceptable. Daniel could see it happen. The way kids make instant judgments that adults spend weeks agonizing over. 1 second, Kara was on trial. The next, she was admitted to the inner circle, granted provisional membership pending further review. Can we get hot chocolate? Kara looked up at Daniel, checking. Is that okay? He nodded, already reaching for his wallet, the worn leather soft from years of opening and closing, from being the thing that stood between him and the world's endless need for payment. Kara waved him off. I got it. I asked you here. She ordered at the coffee cart. Hot chocolate for Lily with extra whipped cream, black coffee for herself, Earl Grey tea for Daniel without him having to ask. You remembered? Kara handed him the cup, her fingers brushing his for just a second. The contact was brief, but he felt it all the way up his arm, felt it settle somewhere in his chest where it had no business being after 2 weeks of text messages and one bizarre dinner. I'm good at remembering things that matter. The words sat between them, meaning more than they should. Lily had already started on her hot chocolate, whipped cream on her nose, completely oblivious to the adult complexity unfolding 3 feet above her head. They walked. The path around the lake was crowded but not overwhelming. Families with strollers, couples holding hands, solo walkers with headphones creating their own soundtrack. Lily ran ahead, chasing geese that scattered in offended honks and regrouped 30 feet away to judge her with their cold, prehistoric eyes. Kara watched her with something soft in her expression, something that looked almost like longing. She's wonderful. Daniel felt the pride that always came when someone recognized what he'd known from the day Lily was born, that she was extraordinary, that the world was lucky to have her in it. She's my whole world. Kara glanced at him. That must be exhausting. Daniel laughed, surprised by the honesty. Most people say that must be rewarding. Kara shrugged, hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she needed the warmth. It can be both. Loving someone that much, being responsible for someone that completely. It's beautiful, but it's also heavy. Daniel stopped walking, turned to look at her. Really look. Yeah, exactly that. They stood there while joggers passed and dogs barked, and Lily shrieked with laughter somewhere up ahead, her voice carrying across the cold air like a banner announcing joy to anyone who cared to notice. Kara's voice was quiet. People don't say that part out loud. They just say treasure every moment, like you're not allowed to admit that some moments are really hard. Daniel felt something unlock in his chest, some door he'd been keeping closed since the funeral. The first year after my wife died, people kept telling me I was strong. Like strength was something I'd chosen, like I had options. Kara didn't look away. You didn't feel strong. It wasn't a question. I felt like I was drowning, and everyone kept congratulating me on my swimming technique. Kara's laugh was soft and sad and understanding all at once. God, that's exactly what it's like. They started walking again. Lily ran back, breathless and pink-cheeked, her hair escaping from the ponytail Daniel had carefully constructed that morning. Dad, there's a playground. Can I? Daniel looked. The playground was visible from the path, fenced and safe. Other kids were already climbing and swinging and shrieking with the kind of joy that only happens when you're too young to worry about looking cool. Stay where I can see you. Lily was already gone, purple dress flashing between the equipment like a flag marking territory. Daniel and Kara found a bench near the playground fence, close enough to watch, far enough to talk without being overheard. Kara wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, even though it had to be lukewarm by now. Can I ask you something? Daniel nodded, watching Lily attempt the monkey bars with more enthusiasm than technique. Always. How do you do it? The whole single-parent thing? I watch my friends struggle with 2 parents and full-time nannies and meal delivery services. You're doing it alone. Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching Lily climb the jungle gym with the fearlessness of someone who'd never learned to doubt herself. I don't know that I am doing it. Most days I feel like I'm just keeping us both alive and calling it parenting. Kara smiled, but her eyes were serious. She seems pretty happy. I got lucky. She's resilient, way more than I was at her age. Kara's voice dropped, something old moving behind her words. Kids are resilient because they don't have a choice. Adults teach them that. We say it's a good thing, but really, we're just asking them to carry weight they shouldn't have to. Daniel looked at her. There was something in her voice, something that came from experience rather than theory. You sound like you know something about that. Kara took a long sip of coffee, seemed to be deciding whether to answer. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of things she'd been holding for a long time. My parents divorced when I was 9. Very civil, very adult, lots of conversations about how we were still a family no matter what the paperwork said. She paused. But I remember my mom crying in the bathroom when she thought I couldn't hear, and my dad moving his stuff out in boxes while I was at school so I wouldn't have to watch. They thought they were protecting me. Daniel's chest tightened. They were protecting you. Kara nodded slowly. They were. But I learned early that being strong meant pretending you weren't breaking. That's a hard lesson to unlearn. Daniel understood the performance, the careful control, the smile that didn't quite reach her eyes at that family dinner. Understood why she'd built walls so high that her own family couldn't see over them to the person actually living inside. Is that why you work so hard? To prove you're not broken? Kara turned to him, something flickering across her face that wasn't defensiveness, wasn't anger. Consideration, maybe, or recognition. Maybe. Or maybe I just really like what I do. Maybe both things can be true. It wasn't an evasion. It was honest in a way that acknowledged complexity instead of trying to flatten it into something simpler. What do you do exactly? You mentioned tech at the restaurant, but that could mean anything from app development to rocket science. Kara hesitated just for a second, just long enough for Daniel to notice. I run a software company. Business solutions mostly. Workflow optimization. Data integration. The boring stuff that makes other people's jobs easier. She said it like she was downplaying it, like she'd learned to make herself smaller when talking about her success, like she'd been told too many times that ambition in a woman was something to apologize for rather than celebrate. That doesn't sound boring. It sounds important. Kara looked genuinely surprised. Most people's eyes glaze over when I explain what I do, or they change the subject, or they ask if I'm hiring because their nephew just graduated with a computer science degree. Daniel shrugged. I drive a van and drop off boxes. I'm not in a position to judge anyone's career choices. Kara's face did something complicated. Her eyes went soft, but her voice came out fierce. You say that like it's not important, but it is. People need their stuff. You make that happen. That matters. Daniel felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. Felt like someone was looking at his life and seeing value instead of compromise, purpose instead of just survival. You know what's weird? You're the first person who said that and actually meant it. Kara's voice was almost angry. Then you've been talking to the wrong people. Lily ran over, demanding they watch her do the monkey bars. They did. She made it halfway across before her hand slipped and she dropped to the mulch below, landing hard but laughing immediately. Resilience incarnate. Kara cheered like Lily had just won an Olympic medal. That was amazing! Your grip strength is incredible! Lily beamed, all traces of disappointment erased by genuine praise. Did you see how far I got? I saw. Next time, you'll make it all the way. Lily ran back for another attempt, newly motivated, armed with the belief that someone thought she could do better, rather than just patting her head and telling her good try. Kara turned to Daniel. She really is wonderful. How do you manage everything? Work and school and appointments and just all of it. Daniel exhaled, the sound carrying 2 years of exhaustion. Barely. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, helps when I'm running late. Lily goes to after-school care 3 days a week. I bribe her with ice cream when I need her to be patient while I finish Saturday deliveries. He paused, looking at his hands. It's not pretty. There's no system. We're just figuring it out day by day. Some days we eat cereal for dinner and call it a win. Kara smiled, something warm in her eyes. Sounds like you're doing better than you think. They sat there while Lily played, talked about small things and big things and everything in between, about Lily's obsession with dragons and the elaborate mythology she'd created where they had governments and philosophical debates about the ethics of hoarding gold. Kara told him about Margaret's garden, about how she'd taken up painting after the divorce and their house was full of abstract canvases that looked like emotions made visible. Slashes of red and blue that didn't represent anything specific but made you feel things anyway. Eventually, Lily declared she was hungry, her voice carrying across the playground with the certainty of someone whose needs were immediate and non-negotiable. They walked to a food truck near the parking lot that served grilled cheese and tomato soup and fries that were hand-cut and fried in oil that smelled like comfort. Lily got a grilled cheese with the crusts cut off. Daniel and Kara split an order of fries that were too salty and perfect, the kind that burned your mouth, but you kept eating them anyway, because some things are worth minor pain. Lily sat between them on the curb, swinging her legs and humming to herself. Then she turned to Kara, her voice casual in that way kids have when they're about to ask something important. Kara, are you Dad's girlfriend? Daniel nearly choked on a fry. Actually choked, coughing while Lily patted his back helpfully, and Kara tried very hard not to laugh. Lily, Kara waved him off, her voice gentle. It's okay. Then to Lily, serious. We're friends. Is that okay with you? Lily nodded, satisfied with the honesty. Okay. I like you. You're nice. And you didn't laugh at my dragon drawings. Kara's eyes went soft. I would never laugh at your dragon drawings. They're excellent. The anatomical detail alone is impressive. Lily grinned and went back to her grilled cheese, the matter settled as far as she was concerned. The afternoon slipped away in the way good days do, hours passing without wait. They walked more laps around the lake. Lily found sticks and declared them magic wands, casting spells to make the geese fly, or the clouds move, or Daniel's hair stand up. Kara played along with the kind of seriousness that made Lily light up, taking the magic seriously, because taking a child's imagination seriously was the same as taking the child seriously. Daniel watched them and felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. Want. Not just attraction, though there was that. Not just appreciation for someone being kind to his daughter, though that mattered more than he could articulate. But want in the deeper sense. The kind that meant he wanted more Saturdays like this. More moments where Lily laughed and Kara smiled and everything felt easy in a way life hadn't felt in years. By 4, the sun was thinking about setting, turning the sky pink and orange like someone had spilled paint across the horizon. Lily was fading, her energy finally depleted, walking slower and leaning against Daniel's leg. We should get her home. Kara nodded, but she looked equally reluctant, like she wasn't ready for the day to end either. They walked back to the parking lot. Lily climbed into the van and was asleep before Daniel finished buckling her seatbelt, her head lolling to the side, mouth slightly open, completely surrendered to exhaustion. Kara stood by the driver's door, hands in her coat pockets. Thank you for today. Daniel shook his head. I should be thanking you. You didn't have to spend your Saturday with us. I'm sure you had other things you could have been doing.
Kara's voice was quiet but certain. I wanted to be here. There's nowhere else I wanted to be. The words hung there between them, heavy with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to unpack. Daniel wanted to kiss her. Wanted it so badly it scared him. Wanted to close the distance and see if her lips were as soft as they looked, if kissing her would feel as right as everything else about today had felt.
Instead, he said, "Can we do this again?" Kara smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. All the way. Yeah, I'd really like that. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm that felt both new and inevitable. Wednesday evening, Daniel managed to coordinate with Mrs. Chen for babysitting, a miracle of scheduling and favors he'd have to repay later, but was worth it for 3 hours of adult conversation. They met at a cafe in Fremont and talked for those 3 hours about everything and nothing, about favorite books and worst jobs, and the moment they each realized they were adults and nobody was coming to save them. Kara's phone rang once during dinner. She looked at the screen, someone named Richard, and declined the call without hesitation. Board meeting drama. It can wait till Monday. Daniel noticed how her voice changed when she mentioned work, how it got harder and more professional, like she was putting on armor even just talking about it. Sunday morning, they met at a diner that served pancakes the size of dinner plates. Lily ate her way through a stack while Kara helped her with a math worksheet that wasn't due for 2 weeks, but Lily wanted to start early because it involved making a volcano. So if we need the volcano to be 12 inches tall and each layer is 3 inches, how many layers do we need? Lily's face scrunched up in concentration. 4? Exactly. You just did division without realizing it. Lily's eyes went wide, delighted by the secret knowledge she'd been wielding all along. Daniel watched them and felt pieces of his life clicking together in ways he hadn't known they were supposed to fit. Kara teaching his daughter math using pancakes as visual aids. Lily actually understanding instead of just memorizing. The easy way they talked to each other, like they'd known each other longer than 2 weeks. By mid-December, they were texting daily, seeing each other twice a week, building something that neither of them had quite named yet, but both of them could feel taking shape. One evening, they sat on a bench near the playground at Volunteer Park. Lily played on the swings as dusk turned the sky pink and purple and orange, colors bleeding into each other like watercolors left out in the rain. Kara's shoulder was almost touching Daniel's, almost, but not quite. Close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel looked at her, struck again by how different she looked from the woman at the restaurant. How much more real. Always. Kara's voice was careful, like she was testing the weight of words before she released them. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" Daniel's throat tightened. Next? Kara turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "After we stop playing roles. After we figure out what this actually is." Daniel's heart kicked against his ribs hard enough to hurt. "I didn't know we were still pretending." Kara looked at him, her eyes wide and scared and hopeful all at once. "Are we?" Before Daniel could answer, before he could say the things that were building in his chest like pressure before a storm, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out automatically, a reflex from years of being on call for Lily's school or work emergencies, or the 1,000 small crises that made up single parenthood. A news alert. He read it, then read it again because his brain wasn't processing the words correctly. The world tilted sideways. The headline screamed in bold letters across his phone screen. Tech CEO Caroline Brennan finalizes $120 million acquisition deal. Below it, a photo. Kara in a charcoal blazer, shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit, glass buildings rising behind them like monuments to ambition, cameras with serious lenses, people in clothes that cost more than Daniel's monthly salary. The caption mentioned her company, Tech Bridge Solutions, CEO for 7 years, youngest woman to lead a Series C funded tech company in the Pacific Northwest. Net worth estimated in the high 8 figures. Daniel's hands went numb. He looked at Kara beside him on the bench, worn jeans, soft sweater, hair pulled back in a ponytail held together by what looked like a rubber band from a bunch of broccoli. Then he looked back at the phone, at the CEO in the photo who belonged to a world Daniel would never understand, who lived in a reality so different from his it might as well be another planet. "You're a CEO." His voice came out flat, shocked, like someone had punched the air from his lungs. Kara saw his face change, saw him withdraw even though he hadn't moved an inch. Her hand reached for his, but stopped halfway, hovering in the space between them like it had hit an invisible wall. "Daniel." "You're a CEO." Kara's face went white, all the color draining away like water down a sink. "I was going to tell you." "When?" The word cracked between them like a gunshot. Kara's eyes filled with something that looked like panic and grief and desperation all compressed into a single expression. "I don't know, every time I started to, I was afraid you'd look at me differently, like everyone else does." Daniel stood. His legs felt unsteady, the bench suddenly too small, the park too confined, the whole world pressing in from all sides. Lily was still on the swings, oblivious to the earthquake happening 30 feet away. "How much is your company worth?" "That's not important." "How much, Kara?" She flinched at his tone, at the way her name came out sharp and accusatory instead of the soft way he'd been saying it for 2 weeks. "The deal was $120 million. The company is valued higher, does it matter?" Daniel's laugh was sharp and hollow and hurt. "And I drive a van. I deliver packages. I make $39,000 a year. So yeah, it matters." "So what?" Her voice had an edge now, something fierce breaking through the fear. "So I can't do this." He looked around for Lily, needing to leave, needing to get away from this conversation before it tore open something he wouldn't be able to stitch back together. She was climbing off the swing, heading toward the slide, safe and occupied. "You live in a different world. You have board meetings and stock options and people who work for you. Probably a house I couldn't afford to park near. And I'm..." "You're what?" Kara stood too, her voice breaking. "Nothing. Nobody. Just a guy who delivers packages and barely makes rent and can't even afford to take his daughter to Disneyland." The words tasted like acid in his mouth, like failure, like every fear he'd carried since Sarah died made manifest in this moment of collision between who he was and who Kara turned out to be. Kara's face crumpled. "You're Lily's dad. You're kind and patient, and you show up every single day for the people you love. You're honest, and you're real, and you don't perform for anyone. You're..." "I'm not enough for you." The words came out quiet, final, like a door closing. Kara's voice broke completely. "You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide what's enough for me." But Daniel was already calling Lily over, his voice too controlled, too calm, the voice he used when he was barely holding it together. "Come on, kiddo. Time to go." "Already? But it's not even dark yet." Yeah, it's getting cold. We need to get home. Lily looked between them, her 7-year-old instincts picking up on something wrong, even if she couldn't name it. Kara crouched down, her voice breaking in ways she was trying to hide. Bye, sweetheart. Keep drawing those dragons for me, okay? She hugged Lily quickly, fiercely, like she was trying to memorize the weight of her. The smell of strawberry shampoo and playground dirt and childhood innocence that didn't yet understand how money could destroy things. Then she stood and looked at Daniel. Her eyes were wet now, no longer bothering to hide it. Please, let me explain. Let me... Daniel couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, if he met those eyes, he'd stay. And staying meant walking into a life where he'd always be wondering when she'd wake up and realize she could do better, when she'd see him the way the rest of the world did, as less than. I'm sorry. He took Lily's hand and walked away. Behind him, Kara called his name. He didn't turn around. Couldn't. Lily looked up at him as they reached the van, her small hand tight in his. Why is Kara sad? Daniel's throat closed completely. It took him 3 tries to get words out. It's complicated, baby. He buckled Lily in with shaking hands, started the van. The engine turned over on the second try. In the rearview mirror, through the trees, he could still see Kara standing alone on the path, arms wrapped around herself, head down, looking like someone had just taken something vital and left her with the empty space where it used to be. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again. Then again. He didn't look. Couldn't. Looking would mean facing what he'd just done. Would mean admitting that fear had won again, that he'd run before she could leave him, that survival instinct had kicked in and demolished something that might have been worth fighting for. Lily fell asleep on the drive home, exhausted from the playground and confused by the sudden departure. Daniel carried her inside, put her to bed, still in her clothes, because he didn't have the energy to fight about pajamas or teeth brushing or any of the normal nighttime rituals that held their lives together. Then he sat on the couch in the dark and pulled out his phone. 11 messages from Kara. Please, can we talk? I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. You're not nothing. Please don't do this. Ethan, please. I don't care about any of it. I just want you. Both of you. Please. I miss Lily already. That last one broke something in him. Shattered it completely. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting, unable to find words that could bridge the gap between $39,000 a year and high 8 figures, between a studio apartment in South Seattle and whatever mansion she probably lived in that he'd never seen. He set the phone down, turned it face down on the coffee table, walked to the bathroom and gripped the edge of the sink and stared at himself in the mirror. He looked tired, old, afraid. He looked like a man who'd just thrown away something real because he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve it. The phone buzzed again. Once, twice. Then silence. Daniel didn't check it. He brushed his teeth, got ready for bed, lay down in the dark and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. His phone glowed on the nightstand, silent now, full of words he couldn't bring himself to read. He rolled over, faced the wall, told himself he'd done the right thing, told himself Kara would be fine, that she'd move on, that she'd find someone in her own world who fit, someone who could keep up, someone who belonged in those glass buildings and expensive restaurants. Told himself it was better this way, and tried desperately to believe it. Days passed like something heavy being dragged across gravel. Each one left marks. Monday morning, Daniel woke to 17 new messages from Kara. They'd come through during the night, a steady stream of words he could picture her typing alone in whatever expensive apartment she lived in that he'd never seen, pacing some pristine living room with her phone in hand, afraid and alone. He read the first one sitting on the edge of his bed in the dark, phone screen too bright. "Please talk to me. Just 5 minutes. I can explain everything." Then the second. "I know I should have told you. I was going to. I just didn't know how." The third one came with a timestamp of 2 in the morning. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Lily asking if we're friends. I should have been honest from the start with both of you." Daniel's chest cracked open reading that. He could see her clearly, pacing some high-rise condo, city lights spread out below like a carpet of stars, unable to rest because she'd hurt a 7-year-old girl who'd already lost too much. He got to the fourth message and stopped reading. Put the phone face down on the counter while he made Lily breakfast, because if he kept going, he'd break completely, and he had to hold it together for her. The eggs scrambled easier than his thoughts. The toast burned on one side because he was staring at the phone instead of watching what he was doing. Lily ate her cereal quietly, watching him with those eyes that saw too much. She'd inherited that from her mother, along with the dark hair and the ability to know when he was lying about being fine. "Is Kara okay?" Daniel poured coffee with hands that wanted to shake. The mug was chipped on one side from the time Lily had knocked it off the counter 2 years ago. He'd kept using it anyway, couldn't afford to replace it, couldn't bring himself to throw away something that still worked just because it was broken. "I'm sure she's fine." It wasn't true, and they both knew it. Lily's spoon paused halfway to her mouth, milk dripping back into the bowl in slow motion. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, baby, just tired." It wasn't a lie, exactly. He was tired. Tired in his bones, in his blood, in the parts of himself he couldn't name. Tired of making the wrong choices. Tired of being afraid. Tired of surviving instead of living. Lily went back to her cereal, but he could feel her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. By Tuesday, the messages slowed. Kara sent 3 that day, each one shorter than the last, like she was running out of words, or hope, or both. "I understand if you need space." Then, 3 hours later, "But please know I never meant to hurt you." Then that evening, after Daniel had picked Lily up from after-school care and made dinner and helped with homework and tried to pretend everything was normal, "I miss talking to you." Daniel read that one sitting in the van between deliveries, engine idling, heat blowing weakly from vents that had given up trying years ago. Read it and felt guilt settle over him like something physical, like weight he'd chosen to carry because he thought he deserved it. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He typed, "I miss you too," and deleted it. Typed, "I'm sorry," and deleted that. Typed half a dozen things and deleted them all, because none of them said what he actually meant, which was, "I'm terrified, and I don't know how to fix this, and I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." He didn't respond. Wednesday brought one message, just one, and somehow that felt worse than 17. "Lily left her purple dragon drawing in my car. I can mail it or drop it off, whatever's easier." Daniel stared at that message for 10 full minutes, sitting in a parking lot outside a building where he'd just delivered 6 packages to an office that smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. The drawing. Lily had been heartbroken when she couldn't find it, had looked everywhere, dumping out her backpack and searching under her bed and checking the couch cushions, with the kind of desperation only a 7-year-old could bring to a lost piece of paper. He'd helped her look, feeling like a fraud because he knew it wasn't in the apartment, had suggested maybe she'd left it at school, even though he'd known that wasn't true either. Her face had crumpled, and she'd tried not to cry because she was 7 and trying to be brave like he'd taught her. He'd held her and told her they could draw another one, and she'd nodded against his chest. Okay, but it won't be the same. Now he knew where it was, in Kara's car. The car he'd seen her unlock in the parking lot at Green Lake. Nothing fancy, just a practical sedan that had surprised him because he'd expected something expensive, something that screamed success instead of just getting the job done. He typed, "I'll pick it up," and deleted it, because picking it up meant seeing her, and he wasn't ready. Typed, "Just mail it, please," and deleted that too, because it sounded cold, and he didn't want to be cold. He just didn't know how to be anything else right now. Finally settled on, "Mail is fine, thank you." It took him 5 drafts to write 7 words. The response came immediately, like she'd been holding her phone, waiting. "I'll send it tomorrow. Tell Lily I thought it was beautiful. Because it is." That last part broke something in him. The "because it is," like she needed him to know she wasn't just being polite, like Sophie's opinion of her still mattered, like the connection they'd built over 2 weeks and dragons and math homework was real enough to survive this. Daniel put his phone away and finished his route in a fog, barely remembering any of it. That night, Lily asked about Kara again. They were sitting at the kitchen table in the apartment that suddenly felt too small and too quiet. Lily was working on homework about patterns, drawing careful rows of shapes that repeated. Daniel was pretending to read a book, but actually just staring at the same page he'd been on for 20 minutes, the words swimming together into meaningless shapes. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby?" Lily's pencil made careful loops on the paper, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, the way it always did when she was thinking hard. "Did Kara do something bad?" Daniel's throat closed. He set the book down, even though he hadn't been reading it anyway. "No, Kara didn't do anything bad." Lily drew another loop, added a triangle, started the pattern over. "Did you do something bad?" The question landed like a punch, direct and unavoidable. 7-year-olds were like that. They asked the questions adults spent years learning not to, the ones that cut through excuses and landed on truth, whether you were ready for it or not. It's adult stuff, Lily. It's hard to explain. Lily looked up at him with those eyes that were so much like her mother's, direct, unflinching, wanting truth even when truth was complicated and messy and hard. "You looked happy when you were with her. Like really happy, not pretend happy." Daniel felt something crack deeper, felt the fault line that had opened when Kara whispered in the restaurant, spread wider. "Sometimes things are complicated, baby." Lily drew another loop, another triangle, her small hand moving with the kind of focus that made him ache. "Mama used to say that when things are complicated, you should talk about them. She said keeping stuff inside makes it worse. Like when you have a splinter and you don't take it out and it gets all infected." Daniel's eyes burned. His wife had said that, had believed it fiercely, had made him talk through his fears and doubts and the dark thoughts he tried to hide, because she knew silence was where pain grew teeth and claws. "You're right. Mama was smart about that stuff." Lily nodded, satisfied with this acknowledgement, and went back to her homework. But Ethan didn't call, didn't text, didn't do anything except carry the weight and tell himself it was for the best, even though nothing about it felt good. Thursday brought rain, the kind of Seattle rain that didn't pour dramatically, but just existed, steady and gray and inescapable, the kind that seeped into everything and reminded you that winter here wasn't about snow or ice, but about water and darkness that lasted until April. Daniel was 3 hours into his route, soaked despite his jacket, because water always found a way, when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Probably spam, probably someone trying to sell him insurance he couldn't afford, or tell him his car warranty was expiring, even though his van was 15 years old and had never had a warranty to begin with. But something made him pick up. Instinct, maybe, or hope disguised as curiosity. Hello? A woman's voice, familiar, calm, controlled in a way that suggested significant effort. Daniel, this is Margaret Brennan, Kara's mother. Daniel nearly dropped the phone into a puddle, had to grip it tighter to keep from fumbling. Mrs. Brennan. Margaret, please. And before you ask how I got this number, I looked up your delivery company online and called until I found someone who'd give it to me. Told them I was your aunt and there was a family emergency. A pause. I'm very convincing when I need to be. Daniel believed it, had seen firsthand how Margaret operated, how she'd walked into his life and recruited him into a charade within 30 seconds of eye contact. I need to talk to you. May I come by this evening? Daniel's first instinct was to say no, to make an excuse, to avoid whatever confrontation was coming, because he'd had enough confrontation for 1 week, 1 year, 1 lifetime. But Margaret's voice held something that stopped him. Not anger, something quieter. Disappointment, which was somehow worse because anger he could defend against, but disappointment just sat there like truth. I get off at 6. I have to pick up Lily from aftercare. I can come to you. 7. I promise I won't take much of your time. Her hair was pulled back in a way that was elegant without trying. Her face was composed, but her eyes were sharp with something that looked like carefully restrained fury. May I come in? It wasn't really a question. Daniel stepped aside. Lily was in her room playing. He could hear her talking to herself in that way kids do, narrating some elaborate game involving dragons and possibly astronauts. He couldn't quite tell. Margaret walked into the small apartment and looked around, not judging exactly, just seeing. Her eyes took in the second-hand furniture Daniel had assembled himself from Craigslist finds and hand-me-downs, the crayon drawings taped to walls because Lily was prolific and he couldn't bear to throw any of them away, the stack of library books on the coffee table that they'd gotten last Saturday, Lily's backpack by the door with the crooked dragon patch she'd insisted on sewing herself. You have a nice home. It wasn't condescending. It was sincere. Margaret said it like she meant it, like she understood the difference between a house and a home, between square footage and the immeasurable space where love lived. Thank you. Can I get you something? Tea or water or... I think I have some coffee. Margaret shook her head, efficient. I won't stay long. I just need to say something, and I need you to listen. She didn't wait for permission. She sat down on the couch that was comfortable, even if it was old, and Daniel found himself sitting across from her in the armchair he'd bought 3 years ago when Lily was small enough to curl up in it with him. Margaret's hands folded in her lap. Her posture was perfect. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath, the kind you could build buildings on. My daughter told me what happened, what you saw, what you said. Daniel looked down at his own hands. They were rougher than they used to be, calloused from work, the hands of someone who earned his living with his body instead of his mind. Let me finish, please. The words weren't harsh. They were absolute, the kind of authority that came from years of being a mother, of knowing when someone needed to listen more than speak. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. Margaret leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his face. Do you know why Kara didn't tell you about her company? About her title? About any of it? Because she knew I'd react exactly the way I did. Margaret's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger, or might have been pain, or might have been both. No, because people change when they find out. Every single time, without exception. She let that sit for a moment. They either start worshiping her, treating her like an ATM or a trophy or a connection to exploit, or they start resenting her, questioning her, making her success about their own insecurity. Pause. She's been proposed to by men who'd never met her, just saw her net worth and decided she was worth pursuing. She's been dismissed by men who couldn't handle that she made more money or had more power. She's been treated like a prize and like a threat, but very rarely like a person. Daniel felt shame spreading through him like poison, felt it settling into his bones where it would live for a long time. She thought you were different. She thought you saw her. Not the CEO, not the net worth, not the board meetings and the press releases and the acquisition deals. Just her. Just Kara. Daniel's voice came out rough. I didn't mean to. Margaret cut him off, not unkindly, but firmly. You got scared. I understand that. Fear is human. But you punished her for being successful. You made her accomplishments into something she had to apologize for. You made her too much. The words hit like hammer blows, each one landing exactly where it needed to, exposing the truth he'd been trying to hide from himself. I'm a delivery driver. I make $39,000 a year. She's a CEO with a $120 million deal. How is that supposed to work? How am I supposed to... Margaret interrupted, her voice sharp. You're asking the wrong question. The question isn't, how does it work? The question is, do you want it to work? Do you care enough to try? Of course I care. But wanting something and being able to have it aren't the same thing. Margaret leaned back slightly, her eyes not leaving his, assessing, deciding whether he was worth the effort of this conversation. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you, Daniel. She didn't wait for permission. I see a man who built a life with his bare hands after tragedy tried to destroy him. Who gets up every morning at 5:30 and makes breakfast for his daughter and gets her to school and works a job that's hard on his body and doesn't pay enough. Who does it anyway, because he has someone depending on him and failing her isn't an option. Daniel felt his throat tighten, felt something building behind his eyes that he couldn't afford to let out. Margaret continued, relentless in her honesty. I see a man who agreed to help a stranger in a restaurant because he couldn't stand watching someone be torn down by the people who were supposed to love them. Who sat through an interrogation from my entire family with grace and humor. Who made my daughter laugh for the first time in months. Who made her feel safe enough to be herself. She paused. I see a man who's terrified of not being enough. And I understand that fear. But fear doesn't give you the right to make that decision for her. The words sat between them like something solid. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. What if I can't give her what she needs? Margaret's smile was sad and knowing. What if you're already giving it to her, and you're too scared to see it? What if what she needs isn't money or status or someone who can match her professionally? What if she just needs someone who sees her as a person and doesn't need anything from her except her presence? From Lily's room came the sound of singing, off-key and enthusiastic, some song about dragons and ice cream that made no logical sense but delighted her completely. Margaret stood, smoothing her coat with movements that were precise and controlled. I should go, but I want you to think about something before I do. Daniel stood too, his legs unsteady like he'd been in a fight. Maybe he had been. Margaret buttoned her coat, her movements deliberate. My daughter has spent her entire adult life being measured, being judged, being told she's too ambitious, or too cold, or too successful, or not feminine enough, or too focused on work, that she needs to smile more, be softer, want different things. She walked to the door, then turned back, her hand on the knob. And for the first time in years, she met someone who made her feel like she could just exist, like she didn't have to perform or prove anything, like being herself was enough. Margaret's eyes were fierce now, bright with protective love that would burn down anything that threatened her child. You took that away from her because you were afraid. I understand fear, Daniel. I've lived with it. But I don't respect running. And I won't watch you break my daughter's heart because you've decided you're not worthy of her. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Daniel stood in the middle of his small living room and felt the full weight of what he'd done, the full cost of his fear. Felt it pressing down on him until he could barely breathe. Lily appeared in her doorway, purple dragon pajamas rumpled, hair escaping from the braid he'd done that morning. "Who is that?" "A friend. She was just dropping something off." Lily padded over in bare feet and wrapped her arms around his waist. She barely came up to his chest, but somehow the hug felt like being held together by something stronger than him, something pure. "Are you sad?" Daniel crouched down, bringing himself eye level with his daughter, with this small person who saw the world so clearly. "Yeah, baby. I'm sad." Lily's face was serious, her eyes searching his. "Is it about Kara?" Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice to stay steady. Lily's hand came up to touch his face, her small fingers gentle against his cheek. "Do you miss her?" The question was so simple, so direct, the way only a 7-year-old could ask. Cut through all the complexity and landed on the only thing that actually mattered. "Yeah, I miss her a lot." Lily tilted her head, thinking hard about something, processing the world through whatever logic children use to make sense of adult chaos. "Then why don't you call her?" "When I miss someone, I tell them. Like when you go to work and I'm at school, I draw you pictures so you know I'm thinking about you." Daniel's laugh came out wet, broken. "It's more complicated than that, baby." Lily's voice was patient, like she was explaining something obvious to someone who was being deliberately dense. "You told me that when I miss someone, I should tell them. You said hiding feelings makes them grow bigger and scarier. You said it's important to say the true things even when they're hard." Daniel's chest cracked completely open, his own words coming back to him from his daughter's mouth. The lessons he'd tried to teach her turning into mirrors that showed him exactly how he was failing to follow his own advice. "You're right. I did say that." Lily nodded, satisfied with this acknowledgement. "Then you should do it too. It's not fair if the rule only works for kids." She paused, her next words quiet but certain, carrying the weight of truth. "I miss her too. She was nice. She didn't talk to me like I was little. She talked to me like I was a real person. And she made you smile a lot." Her voice got smaller. "I like when you're happy, Dad. You should be happy more. Mama would want you to be happy." The words landed like truth always does. Simple, direct, impossible to argue with, devastating in their clarity. Lily kissed his forehead the way he usually kissed hers, her lips soft and sure, then padded back to her room, apparently done with the conversation. She'd said what needed saying, and now she was moving on because that's what kids did. They told the truth and then got back to living. Daniel sat on the floor where she'd left him. His phone was on the coffee table. He'd been ignoring it for days, letting it charge in the other room at night so he wouldn't be tempted to check it, so he wouldn't have to see Kara's messages piling up like evidence of his cowardice. He picked it up anyway, scrolled to her name, the contact he'd saved weeks ago. Caroline Brennan. No photo, just a name and a number that had become the most important thing in his phone. 17 messages. He'd read 3, 14 he'd been too afraid to open. He opened them now, read them all. Each one broke him a little more. I should have told you sooner. I know that. I was just scared. I've watched relationships end the second people found out. I didn't want that to be us. You made me feel normal. Do you know how rare that is? I don't care that you drive a van. I don't care about any of that. I just care about you. And Lily. God, I miss Lily. Tell her the dragon was perfect. Tell her I hung it on my fridge. Please just talk to me. Even if it's to say it's over, I can handle over. I can't handle silence. I'm sorry for everything. The last message was from today, just hours ago. I hope you're okay. Both of you. Daniel's vision blurred. His thumb hovered over the call button. All the reasons not to lined up in his head like soldiers. The money difference, the lifestyle difference, the inevitable moment when she'd wake up and realize he wasn't enough, when reality would crash through whatever fantasy they'd been building. But louder than all of that was Lily's voice. I like when you're happy. Mama would want you to be happy. And Margaret's voice. You're not less than her. You're different from her. That's not the same thing. And his own voice, the one he'd been trying to ignore for days, the one that said maybe running was worse than staying, maybe fear was worse than trying, maybe being vulnerable was braver than being safe. He pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, right when he thought it would go to voicemail and he'd have to figure out what message could possibly bridge this canyon he'd created, she picked up. Daniel. Her voice was careful, guarded, hurt, and underneath all of that, hoping despite herself. His eyes closed. His hand gripped the phone like a lifeline. I'm sorry. Silence. Then her breath, tight and controlled, like she was trying not to cry or scream, or both. You don't get to vanish for 4 days and come back with 1 sentence. Her voice was breaking. You don't get to do that. Daniel's own voice broke. You're right, I know. You're absolutely right. But I need to say it anyway. I'm so sorry, Kara. Kara's voice came through sharp with pain she wasn't hiding anymore. Pain he'd caused. Do you know what it was like watching you shut down? Watching you look at me like I'd lied to you? Watching you decide I wasn't worth the risk? Her voice cracked. Do you know what it's like being treated like a walking price tag your entire adult life? Having people calculate your worth before they even know your middle name? Being someone's opportunity or their threat, but never just a person? Daniel's throat burned. Then I met you. And for once, I felt normal. Not CEO Caroline Brennan, not the acquisition, not the net worth, not the stock price. Just Kara. Just me. Her voice broke completely. And you did the same thing everyone else does. You made my success into a problem. You made me apologize for working hard. You made me too much. Daniel felt tears on his face that he hadn't known were falling. I know. God, Kara, I know. And I hate that I did that to you. I hate that I made you feel like you had to be smaller. He took a shaking breath. I panicked. I saw that headline, and I made it about me. I decided I wasn't enough, so I left first. Before you could leave me. Before you could wake up and realize you could do better. Kara's voice was fierce now, angry in a way he'd never heard. And that's my choice to make, not yours. You don't get to decide what's enough for me. You don't get to make that call. That's mine. Daniel's voice came out raw. I know. You're right. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Silence on the other end. He could hear her breathing, unsteady, like she was crying too. I want to try again. The words came out quiet but certain. I want to stop running. I want to show up for real this time. No more panicking, no more deciding I'm not enough and sabotaging everything good. Kara's voice was so quiet he almost missed it. Why should I believe you? The question hung there, valid, deserved. He'd earned her doubt with 4 days of silence and a choice to run instead of stay. Because Lily won't stop asking about you. Because your mom showed up at my apartment tonight and told me I was being an idiot in the politest, most devastating way possible. Because I haven't slept in 4 days, and when I do, I dream about you and wake up feeling like I made the biggest mistake of my life. He paused. Because I miss you. Both versions of you. The CEO who closes $120 million deals, and the woman who pushes kids on swings and helps with math homework. I miss all of it. I miss you. Another beat of silence, longer this time. Then Kara's voice, smaller than he'd ever heard it, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. I was so scared you'd find out and everything would change. That you'd start seeing dollar signs instead of me. It did change. But that's on me, not you. You were protecting something good, something real. I destroyed it because I was afraid and stupid, and I'm so sorry. Kara's breath hitched. I don't need you to be impressive, Daniel. I don't need you to match my bank account or my job title or any of it. I need you to be present, that's all. Just show up. Be honest. Be you. Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. I can do present. Present I can do. I'm good at present. Kara was quiet for a long moment. He could hear her breathing, could picture her wherever she was, phone pressed to ear, deciding whether to risk her heart on him again. Then don't run. Promise me. Not when it gets awkward, not when it gets hard, not when you get scared. Because I'm scared too. This is terrifying for me too. I promise. I swear I won't run. Say it like you mean it. Daniel's voice came out fierce, final, a vow. I promise I won't run. I'll stay, even when it's scary. especially when it's scary. Kara exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. Okay. Just that. Okay. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight for so long he'd forgotten what breathing freely felt like. Can I see you tomorrow? Another pause, then Kara's voice, tentative but warming. Yeah, but I'm coming to you. I want to see Lily. I want to give her her dragon drawing myself and tell her I'm sorry I made her dad sad. Daniel's laugh was wet and relieved and full of something that felt like hope. She's been heartbroken about that drawing. I know. That's why I'm bringing it myself. And maybe some art supplies so we can make more together. If that's okay. That's more than okay. Okay. Neither of them hung up. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like breathing room, like space to exist without performing, like the pause between heartbeats when everything is still possible. Finally, Kara spoke again, her voice soft. Daniel? Yeah? I missed you too. So much it scared me. I kept picking up my phone to text you and then putting it down because I didn't know if you'd respond, if you'd blocked me, if you were done. I'm not done. I'm so far from done. Good, because I'm not either. They talked for another half hour, not about big things, about small things, about Kara's week at work and a meeting that had run 3 hours too long, about Daniel's deliveries and a customer who'd asked him to pet their cat through the window, about Lily's latest dragon mythology developments, which now included a postal system and a democracy. It felt normal, real, like they were finding their way back to something that had been good before fear broke it. When they finally hung up, Daniel sat in the quiet of his apartment and felt lighter than he had in days. Felt like maybe he could breathe again. Lily appeared in her doorway again, sleepy and rumpled. Did you call her? Yeah, baby. I called her. Lily smiled, satisfied with this development. Good. Now can you tuck me in for real this time? Daniel scooped her up, even though she was getting too big for it, carried her to bed like he used to when she was tiny, pulled the covers up to her chin. Dad? Yeah, baby? Lily's voice was sleepy, but serious. I'm glad you called. Running away is for scared people. You're brave. Daniel kissed her forehead, his heart so full it hurt. I'm learning to be brave, baby. You're teaching me how. Lily yawned, already half asleep, her eyes closing. You're welcome. I'm a good teacher. The best. He turned out the light and stood in the doorway watching her breathe. This small person who saw the world so clearly, who cut through his fear with simple truth, who made him want to be better than his worst instincts. His phone buzzed. One last message from Kara. See you tomorrow around 10. And Daniel, thank you for calling, for trying, for being brave enough to be honest. It means everything. He typed back with steady hands. Thank you for answering, for giving me another chance I don't deserve. I won't waste it, I promise. You deserve it. You just have to believe that. A pause, then another message. Also bringing coffee and pastries tomorrow. The good kind. We have a lot to talk about, and we should do it with decent caffeine. Daniel smiled. Sounds perfect. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Kara. 2 words, but they felt like a promise, like a beginning instead of an ending. Daniel went to bed that night still scared, still uncertain about how this would work, still aware of all the ways it could go wrong. But for the first time in days, the fear didn't feel like a wall. It felt like something he could walk through. And on the other side, maybe, just maybe, there was something worth the risk of being seen, something worth staying for.